With the recent release of Security Breach's DLC Ruin, I wanted to see if Stillwell were able to pull off the impossible. Did they actually make a good game? Did they succeed in making Five Nights at Freddy's scary again? Was Ruin able to save Five Nights at Freddy's? Before this video starts, I highly recommend you go watch my previous video, What Happened to Five Nights at Freddy's, or at least the Security Breach portion of that video, as I will be referring back to that video a lot during this one as to not repeat myself too much. Alright? Have all the people clicked off? Great, let's get into Security Breach Ruin. For some quick context, I played Security Breach before playing this game, and man, the difference between base Security Breach and its DLC is night and day. From the moment you launch this DLC, literally from the moment that you see the loading screen, this game looks significantly more polished than Security Breach. For reference, I was able to run this game with the settings on the high with only a couple of minor hiccups here and there. However, playing base Security Breach, I cannot play it, even with the lower settings on, it just does not work. Which is also the final patch that they're happy with, by the way. And I also think that right from the get-go, the environment in Ruin is much more appealing than that of the neon brightly lit maze it was Security Breach. The choice to take Ruin in a linear direction was possibly the best choice Stillwell could have made. Making this DLC linear fixes a lot of the problems that the previous game had. It's much harder to get lost in this game, so much so the lack of a map doesn't hurt this game at all, not that it worked in the base game anyway. The horror in this game, which I'll elaborate on later, is so good because the devs were actually able to plan out where the player is at all times. This means there's no frustrating staff bots constantly interrupting the flow of the game and ruining any ambience that may have been present. And as I'm sure you have guessed, this game being linear also means that a whole lot of potential glitches are now nowhere to be seen. Which isn't to say there aren't any major or minor glitches, which I'll touch on later, but the minor ones that were present in Security Breach aren't here, and it is such an improvement of the quality of life. There was a glitch in Security Breach where it always sounded like the animatronics were right next to you even if they weren't a threat or anywhere to be seen. And it not being present in Ruin makes the game flow so damn nicely. Which, speaking of the game, let's talk about the gameplay of Ruin. To start this game, we see Cassie, some friend of Gregory's, arriving at the Pizzaplex due to supposedly being called here by Gregory. When Cassie arrives, however, old mate Greg is nowhere to be seen, so naturally speaking, this small child jumps into the Pizzaplex with no way of retreat, only to find that it is incredibly run down and basically falling apart. The environment that you traverse in this game does wonders at both telling the story and enhancing the aspects of what horror are present. I know it may be hard to remember, but Five Nights at Freddy's is meant to be a horror franchise. It was at one point scary, it wasn't always brightly lit and full of colourful characters. After descending down a ladder and retrieving a flashlight from this poor staff bot, Cassie pushes on forth into the complete darkness that is the ruins of the Pizzaplex. Heading deeper in, you almost get crushed on some stairs and you also find another staff bot with a flashlight. And I, much like every single one who played this game, tried to pick up both, but you cannot dual wield flashlights, something that will come back to bite you much later on. After going through this area that is honestly very tense and the sound design is incredibly well done, constantly creaking and making you wonder if something is nearby, Cassie will find a walkie-talkie that Gregory is calling out from. Definitely the real Gregory tells us that he's trapped underneath Roxy Raceway, which Cassie then incorrectly calls Roxy Racers. I don't know how they missed this, it has always been Roxy Raceway in the game. But anyway, we head into an elevator shaft and get a totally unpredictable jump scare. Yep. I was about to say, this is going to be the first ladder jump scare, and sure enough, it was. More creaky sounds, a viewing of the blob, and a Chica jump scare later, which, man, Chica is looking bad. We get a Faz wrench. Seriously? It's called a Faz wrench? It's not even a wrench. Anyway, not the point. After a few more dark hallways and a Monty jump scare, we get the title screen. The opening of this game is done incredibly well. I'm not going to do a whole play-by-play of the entire game, as directly after this we get our security mask, and that's when mundanity sets in. But man, these opening moments, despite basically being a walking simulator, is already more polished, engaging, and spooky than anything that we see in base Security Breach. It's just a shame that as soon as you get this mask, this doesn't continue, because all tension is immediately gone. You see, after you get the Vanny mask, which the game calls a security mask, and I'll talk about that later when I inevitably have to talk about the lore of this game, all of the horror that has been built up so far dissipates and it is never seen again. You see, this mask basically plugs us into the Matrix, which does a couple of things. We see the world in this brightly lit, neon, glitchy state. We are able to find collectibles that are only present in the mask, and we're able to walk through fucking objects? I don't know how that works, but aside from that odd gameplay mechanic, the mask introduces the main threat of this game, this glitch bunny guy. You see, the files refer to him as the entity, but I will be referring to him as Mexes or Mixies or other cute little names for him because look at him, he's not threatening at all. And here's the thing with this guy in particular. He calls the animatronics to you if he's in your field of vision for too long. But if he's not, the animatronics don't appear. They're just not a threat. And when they do become a threat in, say, a cutscene or something, they take care of themselves almost instantly to a comical degree. And while the game does give you the illusion of thinking that you're luring away threats, all you're doing is clicking a button, luring, waiting for him to show up, and then doing that again and again and again. So what is the gameplay now that we have the mask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Around the pizza place, you'll find these security nodes. You need to deactivate them, which you do by finding child nodes, by following wires on the floors, and then walking up to them and holding E. That's right, some riveting gameplay of pressing, nay, holding the E key. Now, here's the only problem with this. I'm an absolute idiot. I didn't see the wires on the floor at first. All I saw was this massive arrow pointing up to this weird data electricity stream thing and thought I had to follow that. So I wandered around for about 20 minutes and couldn't find it. Now, I know what you're wondering. How could I miss the obvious wire on the floor? Well, despite the arrow that is pointing up, the wires and the child nodes don't have this glitchy red glow if you don't have your flashlight on, which I didn't have my flashlight on. I was so used to playing normal Security Breach where you have a battery on your flashlight that I just instinctively turned it off when I didn't need it. Because of me being stuck for so long, I had to look up Dorko's playthrough of the game. Now, it's a good thing he got it early because I was playing this DLC as soon as it released, and otherwise I would have been stuck here forever. Once I looked up Dorko's gameplay, I realized the security node that I was looking for didn't look like the weird bunny glitchy thing that the parent node was. No. It was a fucking barrel. How would I have known it was an ordinary ass object? I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. It would have made just as much sense if it were the button to subscribe to the Jerichode YouTube channel, but you should do that. But anyway, me being stupid aside, after holding E on this barrel and playing a little bit of flow with the main security node, I entered the next area to realize that I have to do the same thing again. I sure hope this isn't the only gameplay mechanic this game has throughout its runtime. Spoilers, it is the only gameplay mechanic this game has throughout its runtime. Still, we'll try to make this challenging by having old Mixies show up whenever you're wearing the mask for too long, and if you let him get too close, he'll summon an animatronic to come and get you, but there's only one small problem. You can just take off the mask. It's like cyberbullying. Simply get off the computer and nothing can hurt you. Now, you might think that there's a challenge if he's able to sneak up on you and summon an animatronic without you realizing. Now you'll have to dodge this animatronic while solving the node situation, and you can't just get them away by taking off the mask because the animatronics are real, unlike the little Mixie boy. The only issue is, every time he appears, he plays this loud-ass stinger noise and you just take off your mask instinctively. And if you ask me, this is the biggest, well, second biggest problem with this DLC. There are never any threats to your character. And the next animatronic that we encounter, after walking through a whole-ass computer screen, mind you, is Sun and Moon. With Sun and Moon, you have to turn on the generators again, much like you did in the base game. The only difference here is Sun and Moon just sit there the whole time. They don't come after you. I didn't even know they had a jump scare until after I played the game, because you need to actively ignore the objective and walk up to the idle animatronic in order to get jump scared. After the hard challenge of walking around and turning on generators and deactivating security nodes, you reboot Sun. Or, well, it's Eclipse, I guess, but yay, daycare is done, and I have more security nodes to deactivate again. This time, however, you have the Weeping Angel Endo stalking you, much like in base Security Breach. And the only time I died here was because I was both unsure how they worked with the mask, and because the game activated one from behind me. This is actually an issue that the game has a couple of times. A threat will just spawn behind you and you die. If you don't know what you did wrong, you just die. Usually when this happens, it's not too big of a deal, but here it restarts the nodes all over again. And once you do complete this node, however, you continue on and, oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, there is a second gameplay mechanic here, or, well, third if you count the Among Us conduits, but I don't. At points during the game, you will need to find anomalies in the camera system and quarantine them. Basically, it's just match pictures in order of what you saw. This will remove some blockade in the AR world. This is how we made it through a whole ass computer screen, and this is how this massive endo appears. We hop in his mouth and find our way to the bakery where we see Chica again, and after a Carl the Cupcake jump scare that literally made me laugh out loud, we see that Chica is alive. And right about now is probably a good time to mention I streamed this playthrough on my Discord server. That's right, the Jerichode Discord server is real. It's the best place to hang out with the community and catch me playing games. My Australian internet isn't quite good enough to stream to YouTube, so Discord is my next best bet. It also leads to moments like this.
So you're either a
Damn, she kinda bad. Dude,
don't tell me she's bad. Look
she a baddie, dude. God damn!
She's so bad, dude.
Bro, got that lazy eye act.
Okay, listen. Do you like smelling like actual garbage, like dump and waste and rotten food and all that?
I mean,
would you like to smell?
Not typically, but Chica can get it.
I do it for her.
It's always surface level with you, man. I look past that shit, alright? You're thinking about the smell of garbage and dead children, alright? I'm thinking about what she's like as a person.
Some of those screws are very loose, but
But I can fix her, okay? That's all I'm saying.
I am literally a mechanic.
The link will be in the description. Feel free to come by and say hi. We're holding emote suggestions at the moment, so if you want to contribute to the Discord, you should swing by. But after encountering Chica, my beloved, we see Monty again very briefly, and then encounter Roxy, who grabs us before simply letting go of us. And eventually we travel to Bonnie Bowl, where we have to disable more security nodes, yay, and encounter a bunch of mini music men. This is probably one of the best parts of the game, despite the fact that you're just luring them away with the cameras. Now, I didn't personally experience this glitch, but sometimes when putting the mask on, you just seemingly get jump scared out of nowhere. The reason for this is a bit complicated, but I'll try my best to explain it. When you put the mask on, the game teleports you to a replica of the world that you're currently in, but it's all augmented. That's how they pull off the AR experience that you have in this game. Sometimes the mini music men simply don't travel between worlds properly, which leaves one or two left behind as a nuisance which will instantly kill you. You can lure them away with the camera again, and it'll fix this, but I've seen a few people get very confused by this. Astral Spig actually has a fantastic video explaining this, which you should check out if you haven't already, because I can't explain it much more in depth than that. But after eventually deactivating the security node, which what are we on, like 15 now, eventually we travel to Fazablast and have a first actual threat in ages in the form of this awesome looking headless Freddy. This, alongside seeing the Princess Quest arcade machine tipped over with the sword through it in Benny's hideout, implies that the Princess Quest ending was canon. You see, in that ending, Gregory takes Freddy's head with him in a duffel bag, which is weird, I know, but just go with it. So we're assuming that is now the canon ending. The only thing is, this may or may not be our Freddy from the base game. Here's the reason why it's confusing. This Freddy has a massive prototype stamp on the bottom of his foot that is not present in the base game. On top of that, he has a present inside of his stomach, which if you remember is how we got the Fazwatch in the base game. But if Gregory has the Fazwatch, why is there still a present in his stomach? Anyway, this is an awesome chase sequence that ends with us running directly towards the threat before putting on the mask. When we put on the mask, Freddy isn't in the AR land. I've seen speculation this is because he wasn't taken over by the glitch trap virus in the previous game, which is why he doesn't appear here because he was in safe mode, but once again, I don't know if this is actually the same Freddy. Regardless, after this we hear from definitely Gregory again like we have been the entire time. We find Roxy trapped under a forklift somehow. I don't know how she got here, but we end up getting some Cassie backstory and then we fucking kill Roxy. After an elevator ride where Cassie won't shut up and is just crying the whole time, we find ourselves in Blackridge. I was a little taken aback by this, I must be honest with you, and in my personal headcanon, this isn't real. After we travel through this, we see Candy Cadet again, who can tell you a story if you've collected enough Faz tokens. The story is essentially just the plot of this game, a monster learning the lullaby and then tricking someone. Descending further, we travel in to find a computer with a security protocol on it. After deactivating it, we basically kill old Mixie Boo and travel in to find the definitely real Gregory. Except plot twist that absolutely no one was expecting. It's not actually Gregory. After Roxy somehow makes it back from the dead, we hear from actual Gregory, who leads us out of the Pizzaplex into an elevator where he then drops us to our fucking death. I've seen a little bit of debate about whether or not this is actual Gregory dropping you to your death, but the point is, that's the ending. That's it. Did that ending feel abrupt to you? Because it sure did to me when I first played it. This game kept me engaged right the way through, and I was compelled to see what would happen once we found the Mimic, which I'll explain that in a minute, just hold on. And then the game just ends. Cassie fucking dies and that's it. You can replay this chase sequence and get an ending where Cassie chooses to live in the Matrix and thinks she's gotten away with Gregory, but that's it. This game was just deactivating security nodes over and over again, and then it just ended suddenly. Or did it? Well, okay. You see, the first time that I played through this game, I unlocked this door on the first camera system I found and then swiftly forgot about it. Turns out that there are a few more of these that you have to find throughout the game, and it unlocks a secret ending. Definitely real Gregory, or the Mimic, is now wearing some lion mascot costume thing, I don't know. And after the same chase sequence, except you take a left, he gets scooped at the end. Now, what does this mean? I don't know. We literally just found this antagonist, and now he's gone. Either through the elevator ending where we've gotten away from him, or the scooper ending where he's presumably dead. Why is he wearing costumes? I don't really know. I guess he just is in the scooper ending. You see, this ending, or endings rather, are so incredibly unsatisfying for a multitude of reasons. One of which being that the gameplay doesn't feel like it builds up to the ending at all. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again until the game just decides, that's it. Nothing about the gameplay is ramped up in difficulty, nothing about the story has made you think this is really it, this is really the end, it just finishes. But speaking of the story, that leads me to the lore. And oh boy, oh howdy, the lore of this game is certainly something. Some parts of this game's lore make me really intrigued where they're going to take it next, and other parts make me want to rip my fucking hair out. So, you know how in my last video I mentioned that the player base was split once the books were released because suddenly things from the books were in the games? Well, this DLC is that design philosophy taken to its logical conclusion. The books are required reading for this DLC. In past games, aspects of the books that were in the games weren't all that important, and were often explained in-game, and when they weren't explained in-game, it didn't actually matter. Willie A being on the opening cutscene of Sister Location, for example, it doesn't matter that we're not explained that Afton is the killer because he appears for 10 seconds and then that's it. After the release of the custom knife for Sister Location, you see a purple saggy skin man tell his father he's going to come find him, so you can assume that at least the father that is mentioned is the killer. That Mr. Afton fellow we see at the start of the game could just be anyone. It doesn't seem really important, it doesn't harm the narrative of the game if you haven't read the books. Henry suddenly appearing in Pizza Sim and literally being the guy to bring it all to a close may seem like the books are required reading, but the game establishes Henry from the start as the cassette guy, and more importantly establishes him as the guy who hired you. So at the end, if you follow his instructions with salvaging under paragraph 4, him bringing it all to an end isn't really a shock. Especially considering he explicitly spells out his role and relationships with all the characters in the story in his final speech. Hell, the story of Security Breach actually wasn't harmed by the books all that much either. The books do explain that Gregory is patient 46, but I still don't know how that relates to him working for Vanny, or what that has to do with Ruin, but my point is that is something that's completely side, it's an Easter egg, it's world building, it's not integral to the plot of the game. VR sets up this bunny virus thing, which you can then extrapolate into the reason the animatronics in Vanny are after you in Security Breach. Most of the problem with Security Breach's stories are actually the game's fault. Glamrock Freddy restarting in safe mode and being immune to the virus, or after being back somehow. These are things that aren't explained in the game, not something that you get answers from the books for. With Ruin, however, if you don't read the books, you are completely out of luck with understanding what's going on here. While people like Markiplier were able to clock the Mimic from not being Gregory literally the first time that he heard him over the walkie-talkie, the reveal of the Mimic meant nothing to him, because it was introduced, not explained, and then immediately handled. The main antagonist of this game, the Mimic, completely falls flat. I think the realization that old Mixie Poo was actually the good guy and was trying to keep the Mimic in and not actually trying to harm Cassie was pretty neat, but the Mimic itself just sucks, man. And that's not the only weird thing in the lore of this game. The fact that Venny's mask is considered a security mask isn't really that confusing, as she was the head of security in Security Breach, but the fact that it was made for Class 5 technicians seems really strange. The fact that all the music men and the mask bot have like these weird molded bunny ears is also really strange. Being able to literally phase through objects with the excuse of, oh, you're actually in an AR world just isn't explained and doesn't make any sense. The game does briefly hint at Cassie losing her faculties to the mask through Helpy literally implanting himself in her brain and her seeming ability to teleport, which was probably just her walking, but it's never expanded on more than being slightly hinted at. This has the same replications that Illusion Disc and Dream Theory had, and the only reason I say that this could be such a huge thing, and the reason that I called this whole Black Reach area a figment of Cassie's imagination, is because, well, while anything and everything being fake was not something that was established in the game, it was established in the Tiger Rock book, where a guy literally cannot distinguish reality from the AR world. And while it really sucks that essentially Dream Theory and Illusion Disc are back with this whole idea of AI slowly corrupting the real world and people not being able to tell what the difference is, I think there is some really good potential in Ruin. I think you can do a lot with the Mimic as a character in a horror game, but as a player, I'm not given any reason to care about it, and it just immediately is taken care of. On top of all of that, it really seems like they just threw a bunch of stuff at the wall for the sake of it. Again, being able to find Glamrock Bonnie after deactivating all the wet floor signs doesn't feel like it has any place in the game. It's a cool little Easter egg, but how is Bonnie seemingly connected to these bots? It's not explained at all. And I'm not saying they need to write a whole paragraph on it, but at least any world building would be fantastic. Being able to get Chica's voice box and then return it to her, which then leads to nothing, feels like scrapped content. This DLC starts off really strong, and if it were handled properly, I would like it a whole lot more than I do, but as it stands, it's just really underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, this game is way better than base Security Breach. It's been optimized much better, it actually manages to keep me engaged throughout it, and it definitely returns to the horror roots of the franchise, but I just feel like Steel Wool could have done so much better. Unfortunately, it seems like at this point we're still going to have to rely on FNaF Plus and the other fan work games to keep this franchise alive.
Connection terminated.
Alright, as if like clockwork, during editing this video, FNaF Plus was announced to be at least having Fiznom removed from it, and at worst, it has now become lost media that will never be released. And at the moment, clicking on the link that led to the game's Steam page simply redirects you to the Steam store. So I'll give you a quick explanation of what happened. Fiznom, creator of Five Nights at Freddy's Plus, an all-around very standoffish, trollish, toxic, ruthlessly honest internet man played Ruin and later said that it was boring. Someone then responded to that and said, when FNaF Plus comes out, can we all call it boring? And they also might have joked about pirating the game, but that part is unclear to me. And people ended up sending this person death threats and gore. FizNom jokingly responded to this by basically saying, ooh woo, why can't people send me death threats instead? Trying to alleviate any hate that person was getting and redirecting it onto him. The only problem with that is, when you do it in a joking manner, no one is going to actually think you're being serious or care about someone receiving harassment online. The best thing you can do in a situation like this is condemn what happened and make it abundantly clear to you that if the names are sent to you of the people who did it, then they would be outcasted and exiled from your community. Now, many people were mad at FizNom for allowing his fans to send such things to someone, let alone someone who turned out to be a minor. A minor that FizNom has blocked in the past because it doesn't think that minors should be interacting with him. I personally think that's nonsense. Because while it's true that FizNom's trollish, toxic persona is the perfect breeding ground for those types of terrible people, I don't think FizNom is to blame for that. That being said, he's not alleviated from all fault either. At some point, when you're swimming through shit, you have to ask if it's really worth it to be the guy known for swimming through shit because you think it's funny, or it stops people from idolizing you and taking you seriously. And it seems like FizNom has had this realization himself. He did essentially do what I said earlier, making it clear that it's not okay and anyone participating in those actions were going to be bye-byed from his community. That being said, he has still been removed from his position in the fanverse. And while I quite like FizNom and his antics, it was basically inevitable that this was going to happen. Whether you like it or not, being a part of Scott's attempt to make the community scene is going to lead to a lot of responsibility. You become a pillar of the community. It's not really a negotiable aspect of being in the fanverse. Do I think FizNom often took it too far? I mean, he is an asshole, unabashedly so, but he never really seemed hateful or harmful in my eyes. Do I think it's appropriate that this all stemmed from him calling Ruin boring? No, come on, you should be able to express dislike of a game online, is what I would be saying if you weren't officially tied to that game in a legal sense. I, contractually speaking, cannot go online and talk smack about my place of employment, so it makes sense in FizNom's case as well with Five Nights at Freddy's. Scott feels the need to protect his IP that makes him a whole lot of money, and when this IP is trying to appeal to kids more than ever, this kind of repulsive behavior was risky from the start. I think it really fucking sucks that FizNom may not even get any credit for this game he's been working on with a team for the past 3 years, and I can only hope that he's being paid during development, and not just the idea of he's going to get some of the final game sales numbers. I doubly think it's so fucking terrible that this game, which seemed like it was going to be a revival of FNAF's horror roots, may never see the light of day. The idea that this game's legacy is going to be the fan-made version that hundreds of YouTubers have clickbaited to death and back is so fucking disappointing. FizNom seems like he's getting help and taking an extended hiatus from the internet, which is good. Unlike Jerichode, I think that there will be a community here for FizNom when he comes back, ready to welcome him. It can be fun to be edgy, but at some point you need to ask if it's healthy for you and your loved ones around you. Maybe being funny for internet strangers isn't always worth it. Originally, I had a whole rant here about parasocial relationships, expectations, and how fame, however minuscule, can affect regular guys. Attention can be scary, especially when you don't know how to appropriately handle it, which it seems like FizNom didn't. But that would make this brief update longer than the main focus of this video, Security Breach Ruin. I do think FizNom accepted some responsibility when he decided to be in the fanverse. If he didn't think he could handle that responsibility, he shouldn't have accepted to develop Five Nights at Freddy's Plus. And, just to be clear, I'm not going to be a FNaF update channel. I was just really excited about FNaF Plus, and having mentioned it in my last video and this video here, I thought I would mention this update. If you're curious, I will be talking about the movie when it comes out, and I won't be talking about Help Wanted 2 when it comes out, as I can't play Help Wanted 2. Okay. Back to the video. With Security Breach, we hit rock bottom, and with Ruin, we really needed to bounce. And we did, but not high enough. This unused design for Mexis, for example, is actually really threatening and looks really cool, unlike this goofy look we get in the final game. The animatronics in Ruin are not a threat at all, which means that it's not scary. It doesn't take long for you to figure out that nothing is a threat at any point. And the gameplay boiling down to doing the same repetitive puzzle, which I use that word very loosely over and over again, drags down what it could have been an outstanding experience. Starting this DLC, I thought maybe Steelball was able to save FNaF with this installment, but after letting it settle for about a week, I don't think that they have. Ruin was mediocre. It wasn't bad by any means, I enjoyed my time with it, but I don't think it's going to be what saves FNaF. People don't seem to realize what I mean when I say that. I'm not saying that this franchise will die, the books will continue forever, the merch will continue forever, but the identity of what Five Nights at Freddy's is gone. Unfortunately, Steelball and Scott seem to have the same philosophy of just throwing shit at a wall and hoping that something sticks, alongside pushing the books hard in people's faces. I wanna say that Ruin saved FNaF. I enjoyed this game, but as I say it, it was just the final nail in the coffin. A dying light flickering out in the end of the tunnel. One last-ditch Hail Mary effort that was meant to save this franchise, and unfortunately, fell short of that. I wouldn't be surprised if Five Nights at Freddy's no longer keeps releasing games, but the merch and the books, they seem unstoppable at this point. And honestly, I don't think the games are needed with how much the books are essentially the entire franchise. Did Ruin save Five Nights at Freddy's? I don't think so, but I want to hear from you guys down below, so feel free to let me know how you felt about it. Thank you, and good night. Alrighty, firstly, I wanted to say thank you so much for the support on the previous video. 250,000 views and 5,000 subscribers is insane to me. I want to quickly apologise for the gap between uploads. I was working on another video before Ruin came out, and after playing it I just had too much to say and I wanted to talk about it. As I mentioned earlier, I have a Discord now, which I am quite active in, and you should just come and say hi. It's a great place for the community to get along, and I'm probably going to be streaming and playing games there, so feel free to pop in. Just a heads up as well. Uploads will likely be once a month for a while now, as I'm finishing up my course at school this November and I need to catch up on some assignments that I put to the wayside for the sake of this YouTube channel. Once I finish those, I'm planning on opening up a Patreon and focusing majority of my attention into this channel when I'm not at work. The Patreon, much like the super thanks that are available underneath this video, will just be there for anyone who feels the need to throw money at me. It will probably also help keep me motivated, which isn't to say your comments don't do that, your comments definitely do, but I feel like this would just give me that extra push, you know? I can't in good faith open one right now while YouTube isn't my main focus, but I will when I come back. Hopefully. In other channel update news, I've been sent a few sponsorship offers, although a lot of them seem scammy and dodgy. I wanted to know how you guys felt about me doing sponsorship reads for the channel. After all, this channel and this community is as much yours as it is mine, so please feel free to let me know. Once again, thank you so much for all the support, and I hope that you have a fantastic night.